The continent of Africa was a very different region to what we know today. Before the arrival of the Europeans to Africa, the continent was made up of largely independent, self-governed kingdoms and empires. These pre-colonial civilizations acquired territories through century-old battles and defended their territories jealously with mighty military forces and incredible architecture. The landscape of Africa changed for good, following the invasion of Africa by the Western superpowers. In what was commonly referred to as the scramble for Africa, Africa went from having only 10% of the continent under formal European control in 1870 to having 90% of the continent under formal European control in 1914, within the space of 45 years. At the Berlin Conference of 1884, the Western European diplomats formally agreed the ownership of the African nations that they had carved out. Redrawing the map of Africa, they created new country boundaries out of existing territories, merging former kingdoms with neighboring rivals based on existing resources, ease of access, etc. The idea of nationalism was introduced by colonial powers. In reality, Africa is a continent of over 2,000 tribes and languages. No other continent of the world shares the same cultural diversity. These tribal differences have been the source of many conflicts and civil wars across the continent, even until present day. In this series, we would like to explore these pre-colonial kingdoms and empires across Africa and the world over, beginning with one of the most powerful and conquerors civilizations, the Ashanti Empire. The Ashanti Empire, also known as the Ashanti Empire, was a pre-colonial West African empire that was established in the 17th century in the area that is now Ghana. The empire flourished into one of the most powerful and influential kingdoms in African history, and it continued to exist until the 19th century. It held power over a huge region, which included what is now the country of Ghana, in addition to portions of modern-day Burkina Faso, Togo, and Côte d'Ivoire. Additionally, it was famous for its military superiority, great cultural history, architecture, sophisticated hierarchy, and outstanding economic accomplishments. Many legends tell of how the Ashanti Empire first came to be. However, some scholars state that the Ashanti is said to be descended from people who lived in the thick forests of West Africa. It originated with the Ashanti, an ethnic subgroup of the Akan-speaking people who were organized into numerous tiny chiefdoms. According to some historians, the people of Akan ethnically moved to the forest belt of southern Ghana during the 10th and 12th centuries AD. They formed multiple Akan empires along the coast of Ghana. Their new lands were abundant in gold and kola nuts, which served as an important trading commodity. As a result, the Ashanti were successful in their economic endeavors. From the 11th century onward, the Akan people developed expansive trading networks throughout West Africa and beyond, capitalizing on the demand from other kingdoms and nations from their valuable metals. By the 15th century, European merchants had taken an interest in the Akan wealth, and so the Akan people started trading with the Portuguese by that time. By the 16th century, several highly developed Akan states had evolved as a result of the prosperous trading economy of the region. These states included the Bono in the northern part of the region and the Denkria, Akwamu, Fante, and Ashanti in the southern part of the region. The Denkira became the dominant state and exercised influence over the subordinate states during the 16th and 17th centuries due to its rapid expansion and subsequent rise to power. Over time, the Okoyo clan of the Ashanti people, who lived in the region close to Kumasi, a wealthy interior territory at the junction of the trade routes, rapidly expanded and assumed control over trade while the Denkira were in power. With time, Obiri Yeboah, a ruler of the Okoyo clan, decided to start an ambitious mission to unite the Ashanti and free them of the rule of the Denkira. However, he did not live to see the realization of his dream by the time he died. Nonetheless, throughout his reign, he laid the groundwork for the unification that would later be carried out by his nephew and successor, Osei Tutu. Osei Tutu, who shared his uncle's hopes, devised a well-thought-out strategy to overthrow the Denkira and take power for himself. He first needed to unite all of the other Ashanti clans, and to do that, he needed to take power. So Osei Tutu escaped after spending many years in captivity and ultimately made his way to Kumasi, the capital of the Ashanti region, where he was eventually crowned Ashanti Hene, or the king. According to stories, Akomfo Okonye, who served as Tutu's chief priest and counselor, gathered all the Ashanti clan leaders for a meeting. During this meeting, the priest used his magic to bring a golden stool straight down from the heavens and place it in Osei Tutu's lap. It was customary for such chairs to be symbolic of a chief's leadership, but this particular seat reflected the collective spirit of the Ashanti people as a whole. Around 1700, the Ashanti chiefs made an immediate oath of allegiance to the stool of Osei Tutu as the Ashanti Hene, which resulted in the formation of the Ashanti Union. Osei Tutu went on to make Kumasi the capital of the new empire he had founded. In addition, he drafted a constitution, restructured and centralized the military, and established Odwira, a new cultural celebration that served as a symbol of the newly formed union. He then prudently bided his time, raising an army and forming an alliance with their surrounding kingdoms. After securing these alliances, Osei Tutu led his new army against Denkira. They won the battle, and their triumph enabled them to participate in the European trade that was occurring at the coast. As a result, the empire grew to more than triple its size and evolved into a powerful, war-oriented nation. Unfortunately, Osei Tutu was killed in combat against another state. Before Osei Tutu passed away, he had already chosen Opukuware to succeed him as king. During his reign as king, Opukuware devised the Great Oath of Ashanti to further unify his people. This oath established an unbreakable bond between the chiefs and their Ashanti Hene and was an essential component in the process of pledging allegiance. Opukuware's reign saw the Ashanti Empire expand its territories and consolidate power over their region. Soon he brought Sewi, Giaman, and even Akwamu under his control. The expansion of the Ashanti Empire to include such vast territories allowed it to encompass the majority of what is now the country of Ghana. However, Ashanti faced a significant challenge in the form of war with the state of Akiem, as it lasted for more than a decade. In 1742, however, the Ashanti emerged victorious, giving the empire political and commercial dominance that extended to the coast. This influenced the empire to grow and become the most successful trader of slaves, gold, and ivory on the Gold Coast. In his later years, Opokuware's reign focused on centralizing their administrative structure. He achieved this by reducing the authority of provincial chiefs and increasing the number of subordinates who reported directly to the king. This resulted in uprisings on the part of the provincial chiefs and previously oppressed peoples, such as the Akiem and the Wasau, who recognized this as an opportunity to fight for their independence. By the time Opokuware passed away in 1750, he had eventually succeeded in convincing the chiefs to accept his rearrangement of the empire. This prevented the country from disintegrating, at least for the time being. The Ashanti Empire was a highly centralized monarchy that was organized into a hierarchical structure of leaders. It comprised of 4 levels of government: state, district, village, and family or lineage. The family was the fundamental political unit of the empire, and the Obsuya Payin, also known as the head of the family or lineage, served as the family's leader. The family was followed by the village, which was led by Otikro. When the villages were merged together, the resulting divisions were called Ohene. When these divisions were grouped together, they would become provinces, which would later combine to form states that were also known as Omanhene. The Ashanti Empire was comprised of several states ruled over by Ashanti Hene, also known as the king. The Ashanti Hene occupied the most powerful position in the Ashanti's hierarchy of government. He was the leader of the government, the head of the army, and the highest court judge. He was also the only person who could order public executions. Each Ashanti Hene was elevated to his position on the sacred golden stool, which served as a symbol of the king's authority. The Ashanti Hene enjoyed great power, yet he did not have complete and unchecked royal authority. Because of this, he was forced to delegate considerable legislative and executive authority to the Ashanti's highly developed administration. However, the king was the only individual in the Ashanti Empire who had the authority to seek the death penalty for a criminal offense. The Ashanti Hene ruled over all the people and states, and the people elected him the same way every other chief was elected. Within the hierarchical structure of the Ashanti Empire, every leader swore loyalty to the one above them, from the village level all the way to the Ashantehene, who swore allegiance to the empire. The power of the Ashantehene was also severely limited by the elders. The king shared a lot of decision-making power with the National Assembly, made up of chiefs and provincial rulers. This system allowed the chiefs of the various divisions to check on the power of their king. In actuality, this resulted in the establishment of a system of checks and balances. The Ashanti economy was built on the foundation of agriculture, gold, and slavery. It greatly impacted the empire's historical development. Its lands were rich in gold, cocoa, and kola nuts. The Ashanti economy relied heavily on agriculture as its primary sector. The Ashanti were skillful farmers who grew a wide range of crops including yams, cassava, maize, and palm oil. This enabled the Ashanti Empire to maintain a large population and a growing military because the rich grounds were well suited for agriculture. Gold was an additional resource that was very essential to the Ashanti economy. The empire had plentiful supply of gold mines, and this precious metal was employed as a medium of exchange and in ornamental and spiritual contexts. The gold from the Ashanti mines was in high demand throughout West Africa, and it was traded not just with the states surrounding Ghana, but also with the Europeans. In addition, the Ashanti exchanged the commerce of ivory, spices, and other extensive items, which further contributed to their economy's growth. Additionally important to the Ashanti economy was the institution of slavery. It is thought that during the height of its power, the Ashanti Empire controlled several thousand people who were held as slaves. This made the Ashanti Empire to be one of the most powerful slave-trading empires in West Africa. Slaves were sent to work in the fields and mines where they were used for manual labor, and they also served in the crucial capacities in the Ashanti military. The Ashanti culture was rich and dynamic, and one that was passed down from one generation to another. The culture is still practiced to this day and is celebrated in various ways, including the rites and traditions. The celebration of the Adekese festival is one of the most well-known customs that date back to the time of the Ashanti Empire. This festival was used as a celebration to get people together to celebrate their heritage. It was conducted twice a year, and it was during this celebration that the Ashantehene would take a seat on his unique stool and listen to the demands and requests from his people. The Ashanti also practiced strong oral traditions, which involved storytelling to pass down their history and traditions through generations. They maintained the belief that telling stories is an important part of preserving their heritage and culture for future generations. Also, the Ashanti people had a profound spiritual connection to their land. They held a belief that their ancestral land was holy, and that was where their ancestors lived. Therefore, they treated their land with utmost respect and considered it a responsibility to care and preserve for it for future generations. The army of the Ashanti Kingdom was a formidable power that was respected by its allies and feared by its adversaries. It was composed of both regular soldiers and the elite warriors known as the Ashanti Confederacy. The regular soldiers received early extensive training in the art of warfare, and they were armed with various weaponry, including spears, swords, and shields. On the other side, the Ashanti Confederacy was an exclusive group of warriors who were the pride of the Ashanti army. They were selected for their bravery, strength, and expertise in combat, because they were the best of the best. They were also armed with maces, axes, and lances. While the Ashanti were building trade networks deeper into the country, more and more British merchants and expeditionary forces kept coming to the coast to try and monopolize trade there. This would mark the beginning of the decline of the empire throughout the 19th century. Some of the more populous but less powerful neighboring states, such as the Fante and the Denkira, welcomed the British as prospective allies in their conflict with the Ashanti. Their Ashanti masters had a pattern of raiding the territories of their neighbors in search of captives who were then traded for European goods or made to work in the gold fields. This practice was the origin of their rivalry with one another. First Anglo-Ashanti War. Tensions between the Ashanti and their British neighboring rivals continued to rise until 1824, where the Ashanti dispatched a force of up to 10,000 warriors to expel the British, Fante, and Denkira from their territory. And as a warning to anyone interested in encroaching on their territory, they hung the severed head of the defeated British governor, Charles McCarthy, in the city of Kumasi, which was the capital at the time. Second Anglo-Ashanti War. 2 years after their initial defeat, the British successfully gained revenge against the Ashanti at Cantamanto. The Ashanti were coerced into giving up their claims to many coastal people, notably the Fante and the Akyem. Third Anglo-Ashanti War. The subsequent few decades were marked by a moderate degree of peace until the British purchased the last of the Dutch forts along the Gold Coast, therefore establishing themselves as the sole European power in the area. The Ashanti were well known for their prowess with bows, muskets and spears. Nevertheless, the British cannon that marched on Kumasi proved too much for them to overcome. The Ashanti were forced to give up their claims to any territory that was located south of the Pra River once more. By 1874, the entire coast had been formally incorporated under the Gold Coast colony that the United Kingdom had established. Although their dominance waned over the course of the subsequent 15 years, the Ashanti were not prepared to give up just yet. The Ashanti recovered their strength, but the British, fearing the colonial claims of the French, wanted to consolidate their hold on the interior range of their colony. They bombarded Kumasi with cannon fire in 1895 and 1896, ultimately leading to the Ashanti Agyem and Prempeh being forced to accept exile. This allowed them to escape to full-scale battle and the devastation of the capital city. Final Anglo-Ashanti War. By 1901, the Ashanti had reached the point where they could no longer endure the European occupation. The formidable military leader, Ya Asentewa, who lived from 1850 to 1912, took the helm. She began aggressive operations intending to retake their capital. However, the British forces called for reinforcement from Nigeria and Sierra Leone and made Ya Asentewa to surrender. This defeat solidified the British hold of the Gold Coast and marked the end of the Ashanti Empire while introducing the colonial era of the British in West Africa. Although the British maintained their dominance over the Gold Coast for many years, it was not permanent. The colony was elevated to the status of dominion within the British Commonwealth in the year 1957. And then, only a few years after that, in 1960, the region attained its independence and became known as the Republic of Ghana. Around the same time, Kwame Nkrumah became Ghana's very first president and was inaugurated during this period. Nevertheless, although there was a new kind of governance in the region, that did not mean that the Ashanti monarchs were no longer in existence. As the modern nation of Ghana started to take shape, the administrative area of Ashanti was established in a historic center of the empire, and Kumasi was chosen to serve as the territory's capital city. There, the kings were free to observe many of their traditions without interference. This brings us to the end of our history lesson on the Ashanti Kingdom. If you've enjoyed this video, please share with your networks, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel to see more content like this.